Well, good morning. I'm really glad you're here. My name's Luke. I get to serve as the Connexus Aurelia campus pastor, and if you're jumping in online, I want to give you a welcome. And if you're in Aurelia, I miss you more. But I can't speak for you, but I wonder, have you ever had the experience of interacting with a Christian or maybe a group of Christians and kind of coming away from that interaction, scratching your head and saying, those guys are kind of weird, like a bit strange? Maybe you were in a hockey tournament and one of the teams was a church team and they opened the game with prayer and closed it with several players getting ejected for unsportsmanlike conduct. Maybe you know that mom who is, great at posting daily Bible verses on her social media, and she becomes a very different animal in a Costco parking lot. These moments where what people say they believe and what they do doesn't really seem to measure up. Or people who are so outspoken about how Jesus changes their lives are leaving you with some big questions. One of which might be, if this is what life change looks like, maybe you should hold on to that receipt. But what if it's not just moments of hypocrisy or awkward social interactions? What if there's more to it? What about those moments where Christians are just cruel? Last year I was playing hockey with a group of guys, and on one particular day found myself in the dressing room getting my gear on next to someone I hadn't met. And so he struck up a conversation, and he asked me, he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a pastor. And he said, oh. And I thought, there's a backstory there. And so as we kept talking and interacting together, I learned something pretty heavy. That actually during the pandemic, his very spiritual, outspoken Christian aunt had written a manifesto and sent it to the whole family, and it detailed her belief that the pandemic was God's plan for annihilating people who disobeyed him. Harsh, cruel, wrong. And it had blown that family wide open. He didn't want to have anything to do with Christians or Christianity as a result. I couldn't really blame him. And I came away from that conversation asking myself this question: if Christianity is so good, why are some Christians so bad? And my guess is, if you're honest with me, you've had similar experiences, conversations, stories you've heard, and you're going away saying, if Christianity is so good, if it changes people's lives, if it makes people better at life and loving others, why are some Christians so bad? We're diving into a brand new series today. It's called Counterfeit Faith. And we're exploring this reality that sometimes Christianity can be a force for great evil in the world. And looking at the example of Jesus to understand how to live a life that truly matters. So over the next 4 weeks, Carrie Newhoff and I are going to be unpacking this with you. And today, I just want to dive right in and take on this reality, the brutal reality of the hypocrisy, the judgmentalism, and the pride that so often marks so many Christians and Christian communities. Because my guess is every one of you here has heard of or encountered someone who's lived out their faith in a way that had a really terrible impact on others around them. But let's take hold of a few working definitions before we dive in. The first is, when we say counterfeit, we mean a convincing but fake and ultimately worthless imitation of what is real. Counterfeit faith is a convincing but fake and ultimately worthless imitation of what's real. And also, while there's a ton of definitions out there for religion, what we're going to use as our definition this morning is that religion is a moral framework that divides the world into two kinds of people so that you can justify yourself and approach the power behind life. That's kind of based off some insights from Tim Keller. Now, you might be here and saying, okay, listen, Luke, this is one of my first Sundays. I just came with a friend. I'm actually not religious at all. What does this have to do with me? Well, the truth is, you might not consider yourself religious, but everyone is actually far more religious than they think. Because everyone has a system of making sense of right and wrong, good and evil, dividing the world into scenarios where it's like these people are doing what's right, these people are wrong, these people are kind, these people are bad. And you try to live inside of that framework to demonstrate that you're a good person, to justify your existence, and if you believe in God, to get on God's good side. And here's what's actually good about that framework and that system that you live by. It shows that you care. It shows that you want your life to matter, that you want to have a purpose. You want the career, the relationships, the projects, the experiences that you devote your life to truly matter. And that's actually really honorable and good. But here's the bad news with that, is that it's a lie. Let me explain why. If your religion, quote unquote religion, is romance, is being in love, you'll naturally start to define the world through people who are in relationships, people who are out of relationships. And you'll be desperate to get in a relationship and to stay in a relationship. And you'll define your worth, your system of self-justification will be drawn from your romantic partner, your sense of value and significance. And inevitably, your temptation will be to look down on people who just are hopelessly single and can't get it together like you have. But if that relationship falls apart, you'll feel like your life is over, because that was what justified that your life matters. If your religion, quote unquote religion, is your career, your job, you'll pursue jobs and titles that give you good status, that are respectable, that give you a good income. But your temptation will be to start to look down on people who don't have the caliber of job that you have, that aren't as well trained as you, that don't make as much money as you. And you'll place your sense of self-worth and value in the title you have, in the money you make, in the status that gives you in your professional sphere and beyond. But what happens if you lose your job? What happens if you retire? What happens if a robot replaces you? When your whole sense of identity and self-worth is wrapped up in what you do, and now you're unemployed. You see, you might not be religious, but so many of us have frameworks, moral frameworks, that we divide people into, that we use to justify ourselves. And if we believe in God, get on God's good side. And it's a lie. How can I tell you that it's a lie? Because I've lived that lie. You see, my quote-unquote religion is religion. That I know what it's like to use a religious moral framework, checking all the boxes, to virtue signal to other people that I'm an insider. I'm a good dude. I'm keeping all the rules. I'm maintaining the status quo. And it made me judgmental and arrogant and insecure. And when life happened, and I couldn't keep a perfect image intact, and I had to be real about my weakness and failures and insecurities, I felt the crushing weight of shame. That's the fallout when you put your sense of self-worth and justification in some sort of religion. The reality is that if you're like me, you can spend your whole life believing and living a lie. But here's the thing. I wouldn't be a Christian today. I wouldn't be a pastor. I wouldn't even be on this platform today if the truth at the heart of true faith, who Jesus is and what he can do in your life, hasn't deeply impacted and continued to massively impact my life for good. And I want that for you. So where do we begin? Well, we're diving into the book of Matthew. If you're not familiar with Matthew, it's a book in the New Testament. It's written by one of Jesus' closest friends, one of his 12 disciples, named, you guessed it, Matthew. Well done. I know, very original. So Matthew writes this book, and he's unpacking Jesus' teaching, saying what he did, And in Matthew 23, he's actually capturing one of Jesus' most hard-nosed, confrontational, in-your-face conversations where he is calling out the hyper-religious people of his day. Those people who, like me, try to use religion to justify their existence, to promote themselves, but have become arrogant and judgmental and insecure as a result and totally missed the heart of true faith. And he's doing that to invite you ultimately to the reality of what true faith looks like and how it can change your life. So let's jump in the first 3 verses. This is what Matthew 23 says. It says, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees are the official interpreters of the law of Moses. So practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example, for they don't practice what they teach." You've heard that probably, whether or not you're inside the church, just in English common language. That person doesn't practice what they preach. Maybe you've heard of a referee who bets on the games they officiate. Or someone who owns a landscaping business whose own yard is a mess. Or an accountant who's mired in debt. How do you feel about people who are leaders in their profession, but yet seem to live a double life? Do you trust them? Admire them? The truth is that what they say is compromised by what they do. And so Jesus leads off by calling that out, calling out this reality that people who try to use religion to promote themselves, they think they're actually serving God, but they're only elevating their own status. And the danger that Jesus wants you to see and understand is that right teaching married to wrong action actually produces a toxic life. It's living a lie. These people Jesus is calling out, man, they love to step into the room and be the spiritual sages, the know-it-alls. They're informed, but they're not transformed. So the question you and I have to ask coming out of that is this: is there a gap between your life, between what you say and what you do? And even to go deeper, and where is that gap costing the people you love the most? This is what Jesus is hitting at when he says they don't practice what they preach. So if Jesus leads off by calling out these people who just love to be the spiritual know-it-alls, what happens when you embrace that kind of life? How does your character and who you are start to devolve if you're all about information but not about transformation? Well, Jesus nails this in verse 4. He says, they crush people with unbearable religious demands and never lift a finger to ease the burden. A number of years ago, I sat down across from a pastoral couple, Bible college graduates, outspoken Christians in ministry. And I sat down with them to ask for their help. You see, I was at the front end of a counseling journey, working through some childhood wounds that had deeply marked my life and continued to impact my life in adulthood. And it was hard. It was intimidating. Often it was an exhausting process. And I wanted their help, their compassion, their support. I still remember it was one of the most vulnerable conversations I've ever had. And they didn't say very much. But a few days later, I got a 3-page letter condemning line by line my story and my journey seeking to overcome. And I was just trying to heal. And the heartbreaking reality is that so many of you in this room have had that experience. You know what it's like to sit down. Maybe it's a close friend or family member. Maybe it's a community leader or even a pastor that you sit down with. You share the most honest, messy parts of your story. You're trusting that their love for God is going to translate into love for you. And what happens? They tear you apart. you were so honest about the bankruptcy, about the divorce, about the mental illness, about the abuse, about the addiction. And their response was crushing. You know what counterfeit faith does? Counterfeit faith does? It crushes people with religious demands, but it never lifts a finger to help them. Counterfeit faith crushes people with religious demands, but never lifts a finger to help them. So what do? What did I do? Do you just throw out Christianity? Do you just reject Jesus and say, well, clearly that's worthless? No, I came back to the words of Jesus himself, who he is, how he responds to the broken and the beat up. There's a beautiful passage earlier in the book of Matthew, Matthew 11, 28 and following. And I love how the Message paraphrase captures this, because it shows the heart of Jesus towards those who come forward to him honestly in their pain and their hurt and their need. Jesus says this, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. You see, Jesus is the one who meets you in your burdens by lifting those, who responds to the fractures in your life with compassion, who shows up not with harshness and condemnation, but with healing and hope. And it's to point you to this truth, that condemnation does not create transformation, but compassion does. And you're invited to experience the compassionate heart of God. And that's the experience that changed everything for me in the wake of that pain. That's the experience I hope and pray will change everything for you if you've been wounded by people who claim to follow Jesus. So Jesus has started off by calling out these spiritual, religious know-it-alls. He's exposed this tendency to crush people with rules and judgment and condemnation while never lifting a finger to help or serve. But it actually gets worse. Like, what does someone's life look like if they're devolving in this direction, if they're becoming people who are more and more consumed by a counterfeit faith? What might happen to you or to me if that's how we live? Well, Jesus explores this in the next few verses. He says, everything they do is for show. On their arms, they wear extra wide prayer boxes with scripture verses inside. And they wear robes with extra long tassels. And they love to sit at the head table at banquets and the seat of honor in the synagogues. They love to receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi. If you're like, what's up with prayer boxes and tassels? Just know that's like first century, like this is what I'm wearing so that you know that I'm the cream of the crop as a religious person, that I am uber holy. I'm special. I'm keeping all the rules and I'm looking good while I do it. And Jesus says, that's actually a lie. Because these people are obsessed with religious appearance, obsessed with rule keeping, but they're ignoring God's command to be people of humility who pursue mercy and justice. They're not actually doing anything redemptive in the world. They're just showing off. Often virtue signaling wears religious clothes. The crazy reality is the way in which what we wear, what you project to others, can just be one more system of self-justification. Because religious practice, when actually divorced from Jesus, is actually that. It's just an unhealthy form of self-justification. Look at what I'm wearing. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm saying. Aren't you impressed with me? And Jesus is exposing that because his heart is radically different and true faith looks completely different. These people practicing counterfeit, instead of receiving grace, they're using their appearance, their moral performance, their status, their image, to construct their own environment of self-righteousness. And it actually creates a counterfeit faith where identity is built on comparison or appearance or control. Have you ever broken a bone? When I was in high school, I broke my left arm playing basketball. I remember going to the clinic to get it treated, and it was super swollen and kind of red and purpley, and I'm thinking, like, this is not good. I got there, and I had to get x-rays, then I had to get it casted, and then after weeks in a cast, the cast taken off, and this rehab plan to re-strengthen the muscles in my arm. It's a really involved process because the doctor was committed to addressing the core issue, which was a broken bone. But imagine if I'd gone in there, or if you with a broken bone went to the hospital, and they're like, oh yeah, that looks bad. Let's put an ice pack on it for 5 minutes and then get back out there. Walk it off. You'll be fine. Be like, what? You're a terrible doctor. Because a truly compassionate physician won't just settle for treating the symptom. They'll address the core issue. And Jesus is saying people use religion to perfect their outward image, but that's just like a Band-Aid on a broken arm. Doesn't deal with the core issues, the heart. So the challenge for you is to consider where in your life are you devoted to carefully maintaining your image, but ignoring the condition of your heart? Where are you putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone? Jesus has called out the spiritual know-it-alls. He said they crush people with these judgments and commands but don't help. He said they're obsessed with their appearance but don't actually deal with the heart. But he said there's actually one more thing that characterizes people who live a counterfeit faith. Here's what he says in verses 8 to 10. He says, don't let anyone call you rabbi, for you have only one teacher, and all of you are equal as brothers and sisters. And don't address anyone here on earth as father, for only God in heaven is your father. And don't let anyone call you teacher, for you have only one teacher, the Messiah. Our job title is bad. No. Is building your sense of identity and self-worth around your job title good? Now that'll kill your soul. When I was a university student, I was involved in residence life. I was in student government, and I was a varsity athlete. I was a big fish in a small puddle, really. And the problem was, I knew it. One day I was watching the news, and the story came up of a celebrity who'd been out clubbing, and on their way to their chauffeured car, they were really causing a commotion, a little bit drunk, and receiving several warnings from a police officer to stop disturbing the peace. But they ignored him. They kept doing what they wanted to do, and you can imagine the situation escalated to the point where this celebrity was face down on the hood of the cop car getting cuffed. And as they're getting handcuffed, they're screaming, do you know who I am? Like, do you know who I am? I remember watching this and thinking, like, what an arrogant fool. Who says that? Who thinks they're above the law? Who thinks they're better than everyone else? Like, I would never do that. A few days later, I was walking in an academic building and went up a stairwell and entered a floor, and I didn't realize that it had actually been blocked off from the other side for some painting. And I started down this hallway, and the painter saw me and said, hey, kid, get out of here. But I was Luke, the resident advisor, involved in student government. I was a varsity athlete. What do you think I said? You know who I am? Man, that celebrity was an arrogant fool, and so was I. Counterfeit faith convinces you that your self-worth is based on your title, what you're known for, your status, who you are. And it will corrupt your heart so fast and make you an arrogant, proud, condemning person. And if you can relate to that story, you can relate to this truth that sometimes the person in the room practicing counterfeit faith is me, is you. And Jesus is too kind to leave you and I there. And so here Jesus is confronting this status and title-based righteousness. People who have built a sense of identity based on their title, what they've accomplished, the letters before their name, the diplomas on their wall. He's saying that's your way of justifying yourself, and you're just living a lie. You're not actually becoming a person who is transformed to live a life that looks like the good and loving and true heart of God. So here's the deal. If counterfeit faith is obsessed with elevating the self, what does true faith do? True faith doesn't promote yourself. It points people to Jesus. So in the last couple of verses of this section we're looking at, Jesus pivots into this to show you a better way, the true way, the best way. This is what Jesus says in verse 11. The greatest among you must be a servant, but those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. What's beautiful about the Christian faith, true faith in the way of Jesus, is that true faith doesn't actually confront you with rules and rituals, but with the person of Jesus. When Matthew speaks of the greatest among you will be your servant, he's pointing to Jesus, who's the ultimate servant. Jesus, who left heaven and entered into our world as a lowly servant, who was familiar with people who were overlooked and outsiders, who healed those whose bodies were racked by disease. Jesus, the one who actually got down on his knees and washed his disciples' feet. Jesus, that one marked by humble love. True faith doesn't say, here's a list of rules, make sure you check these off. True faith says, this is who Jesus is. Encounter him and his life and his power to transform you. What Jesus is getting at is actually wanting to confront and introduce and give you a new way to do faith, to confront these fundamental ways in which counterfeit faith is toxic for the soul and invite you into new life. And the first of these is that he's confronting the fact that counterfeit faith is marked by a religion of moral performance, and true faith is marked by humility. That a counterfeit faith says, look at what I've done. Look at what I've achieved. Look at the diplomas I've had. Look at how much money I give away. Look at all my achievements. Aren't you impressed? Of course I'm justified before God and others. And true faith says, God, I need you. I can't do this on my own. I need your help and strength. I need your forgiveness. I want to humble myself to respond to you, the God who meets me in humility. God's grace comes first, not your achievement. And Jesus is the humble servant who demonstrates true ultimate greatness by meeting you in your greatest need, the need for forgiveness and a transformed heart and eternal purpose in your life. The second thing that Jesus is calling out is wanting to confront that counterfeit faith is marked by a religion of self-promotion, and true faith is marked by self-giving love. Counterfeit faith says, do you know who I am? And true faith says, do you know who he is? Because counterfeit faith is constantly working to elevate the self. And the beautiful consequence of true faith is that when you humbly receive what Jesus has done for you, and you let his self-giving love transform your life, it turns you into a person of humble, self-giving love. You've been transformed by the grace of God, and you're ready to give that to others. In fact, you're ready to give up what is first and best in your life to gain Jesus and to give your best to others because he's given his very best to you. You see, every single world religion teaches some form of this concept. That if you obey, if you check all the boxes, if you keep all the rules, if you conform, if you toe the line, then you'll be accepted and loved. And the good news of Jesus says, because you are accepted and loved in Christ, you can live in joyful obedience. I want to just distill that even more for you. If you're living a counterfeit faith, on some level your life is saying, I obey, I keep the rules, I have a good job, I make good money, I have a big house or big car, I show up as a good citizen, I obey so that I will be accepted. I'm trying to signal to everyone around me that I'm valuable, that I'm worthwhile, that I should be loved and esteemed and respected. And true faith in Jesus Christ flips that on its head and says, no, I am accepted in Christ, so I obey. And this is actually beautiful and freeing. I'm about to tell you why, because here's the deal. I want to protect you from living a lie, protect you from a counterfeit faith. And here's what I want to protect you from specifically. The first is self-deception, and the second is shameful burdens. Because counterfeit faith produces pride in the quote-unquote successful and shame in the failing. Like, let me dive into that for you. This self-deception that fuels pride, okay? Because if you think you're a good person, that because of your job or your image or your online followers or your physique or fill in the blank, that you don't need the grace of God, you're just deceiving yourself. You're just looking to those things to justify yourself. And if and when you lose that, it will devastate you. Like seriously, if your image, your paycheck, your possessions, all those things, your moral excellence, if you're like, this is gonna save me, you'll just become a proud, arrogant, judgmental, and also insecure person who looks down on people who you think aren't performing as well as you. Don't believe me? Next time someone cuts you off, be like, who taught that idiot to drive? People who aren't doing life as good as you. But I gotta ask, if you're there, if everybody thinks you're crushing it in work, in life, in family, are you exhausted yet? Women, are you exhausted from having to feel like your hair, your makeup, your outfit has to be perfect for you to walk out your front door, or people won't value and respect you? It's like, come on, you just want to wear sweats sometimes, right? Guys, aren't you exhausted from feeling like you got to look like a prime Arnold Schwarzenegger to be respected and loved? You see, that's what that deceit, that lie that says you justify yourself by being better, looking better, achieving more, accomplishing more. You've got to do that in order for your life to matter or be valued. It is exhausting. I want to protect you from that lie. But here's the flip side of that. If you're saying, you know what, I'm not a success and I can't hold down a job and I'm hopelessly single and I feel like I keep messing up the rules all the time, I want to protect you from shameful burdens that are attached to your failure. Because some of you in the room, you think, yeah, I'm just a mess up, I'm a mistake, God could never help me, I'm just too far gone. And that's a lie as well. Because if you're full of pride, you need to experience the humble love of God reaching for you and humble yourself to see your need for him. You need that humility to be free from what pride does to your soul. But if you feel that you're a failure, that you're worthless, that you have no value, that because you're not in a religion, no one cares, or not in a relationship, no one cares about you, Jesus comes alongside you and says, you know how valuable you are? I gave my life for you. The King of the universe died for you. That annihilates any condemnation, any judgments people have cast on you. That overcomes any regret, shame, or failure that you experience. And so the pride are invited into humility that leads to an authentic life. And those who are full of shame are invited into the self-giving love of God, which transforms who you are and how you live. So where does that lead us to as a result? What God has done for you in Jesus is this. He's entered into a broken world. He's done life just as you and I experience it. Sickness, sleeplessness, opposition, misunderstanding. And he's humbled himself to be falsely arrested and condemned, judged, and crucified naked on a cross. Humiliation. To weave those realities of humility and self-giving love together in giving his life for you. So that if you're someone saying, yeah, you know what, I'm in that pride camp. I think my job title or my image or my online followers, I think that's what makes me a valuable person, and I realize it's a lie, Jesus says, yeah, I died for you. And I invite you to confess that, set it aside, receive my forgiveness, and live in the freedom of new life in me. And on the flip side, if you're here and you're saying, yeah, I see myself in that failure, that person who thinks they'll never be successful at anything, that just, they're unwanted, unimpressive, nothing. Jesus says, I gave my life for you. And so here's what I want for you. If you've never made that decision to say, Jesus, I'm laying those things down. Forgive me for living a lie. I choose you. I want you. I receive your forgiveness. Come, fill my life. Man, I want that for you. I want you to experience a life transformed through Jesus Christ, through a personal relationship with the King of the universe who invites you to lay down pride and worthlessness and to thrive in his love for you. Because Jesus is that greatest servant who enters our world in humility, not chasing power and status, and lives out this incredible grace to you and me. So if you've never said yes to Jesus, receive him now. Jesus, I open my life to you. I don't want to live a lie. I want to live in your love for me. And if you're here and you've already said, yes, I do want to follow Jesus. I've made that choice. I'm seeking to go hard after him. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. The moment you get in your car, to step back and examine yourself and say, where in my life am I living a lie? Where do I believe that my own achievements and accomplishments and appearance are actually what make me valued and a person of consequence and a difference maker? Where do I think my online followers are what define whether or not my life has purpose and impact? And reject that lie. My life has purpose and impact because I know Jesus Christ and his life is alive in me. Or where in your life are you like, I'm just a hopeless mess up. I'm just ashamed of myself. I'm just worthless. I could never overcome this. To reject that and say, no, Jesus, the truth is you gave your life because you love me. So humbly receive God's grace to you daily and extend that grace to others. The bottom line of all of this is that true faith doesn't promote yourself, your accomplishments, your appearance. It points people to the life-transforming love of Jesus. Let's pray. Holy Spirit, we welcome you here and we thank you for the gift of your word. Thank you that Jesus wrestled with that same question we do. The reality that sometimes religion corrupts, compromises, and causes harm. But the way of Jesus, true faith, is marked by humility and self-giving love. And so God, today I just want to pray for every single person who's here who has believed the lie that leads to pride, that their achievements, their appearance, their status, their successes are what actually make them significant, valuable, cause their lives to be a life of purpose. Help them to lay down that lie and to humbly receive your grace, your forgiveness. And God, I pray for everyone listening who thinks that they're just a mess up, a mistake, that their story could never be redeemed. Would you cause them to know the incredible reality of your self-giving love, that you gave your life for them, that they are infinitely valuable to you. And together, would you make us a people and a community who live in step with the humility and the self-giving love of God, a community marked by true faith.